Okay, so we are on Daf Mem Gimel on the base at the bottom. We have a Mishnah. It's the last Mishnah in Perek HaMafkid. And again, we are talking about the whole inyan of responsibility of a shomer or a shayel, who one of the categories for conversion, for possible theft or accident or something happening to the property, and what responsibilities does he bear? We have the Machlokes Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Rabbi Akiva, and now we are in this final Mishnah. So the Mishnah starts out by saying, so this is a very interesting subject, because here we start off by saying that if a shomer, someone who is guarding a pikadon, has kavana, machshava, hasn't stolen, he hasn't done anything. But hachoshev l'shloch yad b'pikadon, if someone has an intention to misappropriate or to steal or to do something with the item that he has under his shmira. Again, Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai chayev, Beis Hillel ein chayev v'shishlach bo yad. So here, this is very interesting. Again, we know that Beis Shammai is always machmir. So Beis Shammai says that intention itself has the strength of making him chayev if something happens to the item later. In other words, he announces, okay, and Rashi even says, he sits there before two edim, etel pikadono shel ploni la'atzmi. I'm taking this pikadon for myself. Two witnesses hear him say it. He hasn't done anything. And then this item, he hasn't even touched it. And then this item breaks of no responsive. In other words, not because of this shliach, happenstance. It fell off the table or someone else pushed it, whatever. Says Beis Shammai chayiv. You're chayiv to return the item. Says Rashi, ba'onsim mehayom v'hala, from the day on when he said it. Imnenas chayiv bechrayos. Now, this is an amazing chumrah by Beis Shammai, because by all rights, he did nothing. He just uttered some words, and then he wasn't even responsible for the breakage. Nevertheless, Beis Shammai says chayiv. Beis Hillel says ein chayiv yishlach bo yad. He actually has to have shlichus yad. He has to have actually touched it and misappropriated. Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, im lo shalach yado b'meleches re'ehu, that if he does not. And by the way, this is shlichus yad, what we're talking about. This is the whole line of shlichus yad that we talk about. If he does not actually send his hand or put his hand on the item of re'eyu, of his fellow man, so he didn't touch it. The Beis Hillel says lo shalach. If he didn't touch it, there's no chiyuv. So that's the stark machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Okay, now. Okay, second part of the Mishnah. Hites achavius v'notel haimenu revius. If he tilted the chavius, hita, in other words, he didn't pick it up. There is no kinyan here, in distinction to the final part of the Mishnah. Hita as chavius, he tilted the chavius v'notel haimenu revius, and he drank from it a revius of yayin, which is considered chashivus. That's considered enough to make someone responsible. Then v'nishbara, and then subsequently it breaks. Same thing, not of his responsibility. It fell off the table. Whatever happened, eina mishalim ella revius. All he has to do is he has to return the revius which he misappropriated, which he took improperly. Says Rashi, hitas achavis milsa ba'penafshi. It's a separate matter, has nothing to do with the first part of the Mishnah, but separately there is this chiyuv. Now, the last part of the Mishnah, higbia. Higbia means he lifted it and he made a kinyan hagbah, but not l'haimenim revius v'nishbara. The same thing, he drank a revius, but he actually lifted it off the table and he drank from it, not tilting it. Mishalem de make kula, he has to pay the value of the whole thing. He has to pay for the whole thing, says Rashi. Sorry, Hita is okay. En mishamel revius the shlichus yad en mechayev onsen at shim shachlo or yagbia the have a kinyan. In other words, to the previous case, you have to have a kinyan, and if he was Hita, there was no kinyan. Yagbia v'notel, says Rashi, the high kiniya b'hagbosa. He was kained with hagba. Chisorim and atilas revius chayev ba'onsel. He's chayev for the owners, and he has to pay the value of the whole thing. We'll see in a minute why doesn't he just pay revius, but we'll see in a minute. So in other words, Mishnah has three parts, and we're sort of getting a flavor here that each section has its own separate sort of thinking as to why there is a chiyuv or not chiyuv. Okay, all right. So that's the Mishnah. Now we go Mem Daled Amud Aleph, the top of the Gemara, and we're going to talk specifics. Okay, Minoh Hanamili. First of all, the Gemara asks, how do you know all this? In other words, the Gemara is asking, what's the source of all of this discussion that we had in the Mishnah? Obviously, there is a source, and we quoted it, but we're going to now get into a little bit more detail, why there is this machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and what this whole thing means. Minoh Hanamili, how do we know all this? The Tana Rabbanan, because we learned Tana Rabbanan, and this is a pasuk in the Torah. This is in Shmos. The Torah says, "I'll call dvar pesha." And literally, "I'll call dvar pesha." The Torah says for every pesha means carelessness or negligence. I'll call dvar pesha. On that pasuk, I'll call dvar pesha. Beis Shammai omrim. From that we learn Beis Shammai omrim melamed shechayev ala machshava kamasa. He's going to interpret those words, we'll see in a minute, that machshava, intent, is kamasa, is like doing. Beis Hillel omrim, ene chayiv ad sheyishlach bo yod, again, until he actually converts it, shenemar, im lo sholach yada b'mlechas re'ehu. So here we have, let's take a look at the pasuk itself. The pasuk is in Shmos. So in Mishpatim, it says as follows: Im lo yimotze haganav. In other words, the ganav went ahead and we're going to have a beis ish. So im yimotze haganav, in the previous pasuk, if they find the ganav, yishalem shnayim, and they convict him, he's chayav kev. Im lo yimotze haganav, v'nikra valabayis el Elohim, and the if they don't find the ganav and and he approaches Elohim is the court, is the Bezdin. If he did not do shlichas yad, means he did not put his hand on the property. I'll call dvar pesha on every matter of pesha. Al shur, al chamar, al seh, al salma, al kol aveda. We had quoted this pasuk in the past, but that's the source of shlichas yad. That's the pasuk for shlichas yad. So what's this machlokes about? So Beis Shammai says that from his interpretation, that once you have a dvar pesha, uttering the dvar pesha is sufficient to make a chiyuv, especially with the edim, right? You have two edim who heard the utterance, and they can say, yes, that was his intent, machshava kamaisa. That's the machlokes. Beis Hillel says, no, you actually have to have shlichus yad. That you have to have shlichus yad, that he has to have actually converted it. Otherwise, a person can go around all day with machshavas, and we don't say that with every thought in his mind, even if he utters it. Okay, so what? He uttered it in front of witnesses, but he didn't do anything. And gevetlach, I mean, in almost all circumstances, you have to have a ma'aseh, and we know. That's why the halakha is like Beis Hillel, because it would be too onerous, literally, to have every time he says something, okay, you're not chayiv just because you said it. So that's the thinking here. That's the thinking.
Rabbi, it's interesting. A day after Zman Matan Torah Seinu, when
David, can you speak up a little bit, just a little bit?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but much better.
Okay, a day after Zman Matan Torah Sena, we had a low sach mode, which sounds something like a person,
Right,
in his mind, he wants it, but he hasn't done anything about it yet. So I
right.
think usually only God punishes that one, right?
Right, you're right. But for the Adam, how could you possibly say that every time a person has? But that's the whole machlokes of machshava kamaisa, and we don't hold like that. We don't hold machshava kamaisa for the simple reason that it would be too onerous on society as a whole. So you have to do something. So Beis Hillel says you have to do something, and the pasuk says that you have to do something. Okay, so now here is the conversation. Omalahen Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel. So Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel as follows: Okay, there's two psuk. There's two halves to the pasuk. First, I'll call Dvar Pesha, and then Lo Shalach Yadam Lechzrayehu. So Beis Shammai said, Beis Hillel, I'm right because Imlo Shalach I'll call Dvar Pesha is interpreted is that anything, any negligence or any carelessness or any dvar pesha creates a circumstance where you're chayiv. That's what he says to Beis Hillel. Amalan Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel answers Beis Shammai. So in other words, they're going back and forth, and each one is standing by his own pasuk. It says, but the pasuk says lo shalach yado. It says it in black and white. So even though I'll call dvar pesha, but still lo shalach yado. You have to have shlichus yad. You have to have something that is concrete that concludes this. So now he goes vat and says im kain ma talmud loma I'll call dvar pesha. So according to Beis Hillel, this is Beis Hillel now. Beis Hillel says lo shalach yado. What does he do with that pasuk? What does Beis Hillel do with that extra verbiage called Dvar Pesha if all you need is Imlo Shalach Yadav Lachzrayehu? This is a common question in the Gemara all the time. If you have two psukim or two contradictory terms, and you hold like one term, then you always have to ask yourself, what are you doing with the other pasuk? What does the Torah want to tell us? Torah isn't just happenstance using words. If it says Imlo Shalach Yadav and then says I'll call Dvar Pesha, then what do you do with Al Dvar Pesha? So now here, Beis Hillel comes out and he says, Shiachal Ainli Elohu. You know why I need Kol Dvar Pesha in this particular case? Because this case is an anomaly to every other case. Why? Shiachal Ainli Elohu. Amala Avdulu Shlucho Menayin. What's the klal? We've had this in Shas, and we've had this in our Gemaras many a time. If you tell a shaliach, go do a dvar avera, who is chayiv, you or the shaliach? The answer is the shaliach, because you can't tell someone to do a dvar avera and he has a dependent judgment, and he says, "But I'm doing it on his behalf." No such thing. You tell someone to do an avera, he does the avera, he's chayiv, you're potter. That's klal gadol. Here, no. That's the chiddush. That if he tells his shaliach, go ahead and convert, then Minayin, how do you know that he's chayiv? I'll call dvar pesha. So now this is an exception to that general rule that if you tell a shaliach that I want you to go ahead and convert, then the eved is not chayiv, and you are chayiv. This is the exception to the rule that by converting, because the Torah says al dvar pesha together with shalach yado, so that's why Beis Hillel needs the extra pasuk. And Beis Shammai with the Gemara doesn't even address that, because we're saying that according to Beis Shammai, it's we're not holding. But Beis Hillel, who are holding, like, how does he answer the question? Why do we need the extra pasuk? Talmud Leimar that he is chayav. This is the exception to the rule. Let's look at Rashi. Omala Avda, top Rashi. He says to a servant, Sheshalach Yad, go ahead and take this away from the other guy, for me. V'chein asa. V'nayin shu chayav. How do we know that the shaliach is chayav as opposed to every other case where if you tell him to do a dvar avera, he's not chayiv, right? So then Talmud Loina, so now that's what the pasuk is teaching us, that I'll call Dvar Pesha, that you're Chayv I'll call Dvar Pesha, even if you say to a Shaliach, where normally the Shaliach would take the Chiyuv and you would be Potter. In this particular case, according to Beis Hillel, you're Chayiv. So Beis Hillel, although he's lenient, right? He's a Meichel. In this particular case, the pasuk requires Beis Hillel to say, no, on this particular case, I'm machmir on this fellow, because you can't, in this particular case, make shlichus and make the other guy chayiv. You will say, but the guy has independent knowledge, like in every avera. Why should he be exonerated? I mean, he did an avera. That's the chiddush of the pasuk, that the pasuk tells us that there's transference of the chiyuv in this particular case, because the pasuk used two phrases, right? I'll call vapesha, l'shalach yado. The extra words teach us that you're chayiv. Okay, so now we've resolved. I mean, so the machlokes Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and our Mishnah, we hold like Beis Hillel, but we say that in this particular case, Beis Hillel is more machmir than he would otherwise be, because l'chayr Hillel, there should be no chiyuv on the part of the shomer, because he made a shliach. He should be potter. In this particular case, tells us the Torah tells us the extra pasuk makes him chayiv. Okay,
but it actually sort of makes sense here in certain ways, which is we say in shliach l'dvar avera. You can't tell somebody to go do something that would be, let's say, violating Shabbos or whatever, because they should know better. They should know they can't do that, and they should ignore your order because they know, oh, this is an avera, I can't do that. But here you might be saying, take this barrel and move it from here to there. Your intent is because you're moving it from the general storage area where you have your own stuff and you have the other guy's stuff. You're moving it to your own area so that it's yours. So when the guy comes back, the thing will be gone. But your aved or your shaliach might not, they're just schlepping stuff around all day where you tell them, move this here and that there. And they may or may not know what your intent is. And so in your intent, which gets back to Beis Shammai, actually sort of matters.
So what you're saying is that the reason why this is different is because he has no knowledge.
Or he may not have the knowledge. Yeah. Because it's not an inherently forbidden act. Simply moving its barrel around is not inherently. It might be that the guy was selling it, that the person he was holding for was selling it to him, and he doesn't know. It might be that he's stealing it, which is the case. It might be all kinds of things. It might be that it was his own thing and it was just temporarily in that area.
Yeah, but
there's nothing special about the barrel.
Yeah, but then the counter argument, it's even more of a reason to exonerate him because he's a totally ignorant individual, and
no, that's the whole point. Is the Eved is in chayev, the shliach is in chayev, the owner is the Baal is chayev. That's the point.
Okay, so I think it makes sense. Yeah, so that's an interesting distinction. That in this particular case, the reason why he is the shliach is not chayev is because the act itself is not a dvar avera.
Right.
It's a dvar avera because of the circumstance, but he doesn't know the circumstance.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting distinction. Yeah. I mean, that could very well be the distinction is because he's like you say, just schlepping. He doesn't know for nothing. Whereas most of all the other cases, and shlich or dvar avera, the shaliach is actually doing the avera and should know better. Very good point. Very good point. Because that is a chiluk. No question about it. That is a chiluk. He himself doesn't know. All right, so that's a logical explanation for Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel says that because the Torah says. So,
Excuse me.
but what's interesting is you're giving a svara which makes sense, but he's saying it's a pasuk in the Torah. In other words, Beis Hillel is hanging his hat not on seichel.
No, but because he has to have some pasuk, because otherwise we would naturally assume dvar avera includes bein adam lechavero.
But does it include not knowing it's an avera? That's your point. He doesn't know it's an avera. So ancient dvar avera doesn't include not knowing that it's an avera and doing something as
it's part of his job to move barrels around all day. He's the warehouse guy,
but that's his job. That's his job.
But when does the Avera begin? When he says something to the
When he
worker?
does the shlichus, when he stretches out his hand and converts, that's the moment of the because remember, Beis Hillel says, "Ein machshava kamaisa." You can't just have intent; you have to do. So the shliach goes ahead, takes his hand, moves the barrel. At that moment, there's a chiyuv, but there's no chiyuv according to Beis Hillel because of the pasuk in the Torah. Pasuk in the Torah.
It's not that there's no chiyuv; it's that the chiyuv goes on the Baal.
No, I'm saying there's no chiyuv on the shliach.
Right.
It goes to the Baal because even though the shliach is the one who stretched out his hand, but in this particular case, the pasuk makes the shomer the original guy chayiv. Right. So that's the theory here. That's the theory here.
But doesn't the Avera begin with the one who starts the sentence?
Who starts what?
The Avera should begin the minute he starts the sentence of the direction to the worker.
Yeah, but Beis Hillel says that can't be an avera because ein machshava is not kamaisa. So when you have intent to do something bad and you say it, no go. According to Beis Hillel, it means nothing. It's only when there's an actual maisa. Beis Shammai says,
But this situation, the minute he starts saying it, he knows it's going to take place.
but Beis Hillel said
No.
you can't.
No, let's take a different example because let's say the owner
It's a
told,
machine or something.
the owner told this person, told his avid or shaliach, I want you to take this barrel from my house to outside, and it's into a Rishus Rabbim on Shabbos. Okay, the Avera doesn't start when he says it. The avid or the shaliach should turn around and say, wait a minute, then I'm going to be chayav for Chilul Shabbos. I can't do that even though it's your barrel.
Mhm.
But here, and so similarly here, if the avid or shaliach knew and cared and had control over the situation and so on, he could turn around and say, no, this is the other guy's barrel. But presumably he doesn't really know, and he's just doing whatever the guy tells him, because it's not Shabbos into a Rishus Rabbim, it's just moving
Right.
barrels in a warehouse.
Right.
But to Jay's point, if the person, if the shomer is not aware of the halacha and he's being directed by the Baal,
Right.
and you're exonerating the Baal completely from issuing a directive to do something wrong because he should have known better. Whereas the Baal starting out, he has no accountability for making the wrong suggestion if it's directly opposite halacha. So I don't know how he goes exonerated.
Well, I also when the minute you direct a worker to do something, it's just like you flip the switch on a light, because it's going to happen.
But the shliach has an option to say, no, this is a sin. This is an avera. I can't do this.
But if he doesn't know,
Right, but the difference is that we're not putting putting that responsibility on. So if he thinks, wait a minute, didn't Ruvain drop off that barrel for you to hold it for him? This isn't one of yours that goes onto the
How would
truck.
he know that? How would he know
Right.
that?
So maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. So, but it's not when the Baal says it. Once the shliach starts using it, then he's an extension, just like the Baal flipped the switch. But it's not when the Baal says it, it's when the shliach starts doing it. Just
Right.
like any other avera, or almost any other avera. There's a few exceptions where
when do we
talking doesn't do it.
assume that a shliach knows everything? I mean, it's not likely that he knows the dinim of
No, it's not likely at all. Right.
situations.
No, it's not likely that he knows it at all, which is why in this particular case, we have to rely on a pasuk that the pasuk says that doing this act, you shomer, is going to put you in direct liability, not your shliach, even though your shliach will otherwise always be chayiv. But because I'm saying there's a specific pasuk that says al kol dvar pesha, those extra words flip the responsibility from the shaliach back to the Baal, back to the shomer, whoever it happens to be. So this is
Because you have to sort of protect the shliach from.
but Menashe made a good point, is because absent the pasuk, what's going on here is not an avera in and of itself. Moving from point A to point B is not an avera. Taking it from Rishus Rabbim or Rishus Yachim to Rishus Rabbim That's an Avera. The Shaliach.
But Rabbi, it could be an Avera. If he takes, if he
But in the
takes something,
abstract, you wouldn't know it, Michael. That's the point. In the abstract, you know that you can't move it into Rosh Hashanah because it's Shabbos. In the abstract, you can't know that just moving a barrel from point A to point B without any obvious chiyuv, obvious isser.
On a
You
Wednesday.
can't know that. You can't know it. So you're going to tell the shliach you're chayiv. What am I chayiv for? All I did is what the owner told me.
so let's take a different case. Let's say that someone was carrying a plant which had holes in the bottom of the container into a vineyard where it could potentially be kilayim. You're going to say that the shomer should know better than the Baal, that is the halacha?
Not know better, that the shomer should care. The Baal didn't care, or he wouldn't have said to do it. The shomer
Well,
should say, wait a minute, that's an Avera. I mean,
So
the
the Baal may have been, he may have wanted to put the shomer in that situation. I mean, I don't know how he walks away exonerated completely. I don't get it.
You have to protect the shomer
Right.
against misbehavior by any Baal. Why the shomer is just the shomer? He's not responsible for the directions that he's given. It's on a Wednesday, he says, move this barrel from here to there inside a warehouse. You have to protect the shaliach from the Baal having an Avera done through him. That's what I'm a little confused with. Why aren't we protecting the shaliach against the behavior of the Baal?
But again, let's refocus a minute, because Michael, your example is outside the ambit of our discussion. Let me explain. We are talking about shlichus yad. Your example, while it's an interesting example, is not a case of shlichus yad. In other words, if he takes a pot and it has holes and it could be kalayim, I mean, that whole circumstance doesn't fit into our fact pattern that the Gemara is saying here, that the sender, the shomer, the Baal, whoever you want to call him, is chayiv and not the shliach because of this factor of shlichus yad. Your example has nothing to do with shlichus yad, so we can have a different discussion. Is a person chayiv if you're giving him a pot, if he knows that it's klayim? Of course he's chayiv. If you're giving him a pot and say, do me a favor, just put this into the vineyard and plant and everything else, and he does it, and he has no knowledge whatsoever that what he's planting next to something else might be kalayim, then of course that circumstance is totally different than what we're talking about, and that would be a whole different discussion.
Rabbi, why is it different? Because he's giving him the directive, and you're saying that the shaliach should have known.
If it's obvious that he should have known, yes. But if it's not obvious that he should have known, the Torah will not make someone chayiv for an act that he has no hava amina. He has no hava amina that he's doing a shlichus that's an avera. It has to be something that he would know is an avera, and the Torah says you can't then fall back and say, "But he told me to do it." But on something that is not a Dvar Avera in and of itself. It's a Dvar Avera because he'll take the pot and put it next to something else, and he has no knowledge, then that's a whole different.
But let's say the Baal knew and he told the shaliach to do it. Does
then the Baal would be chayiv. Then the Baal would be chayiv. Yeah.
God, Michshol Lifnei Iver there.
Lifnei Iver, yeah, right. Then you're an example of Lifnei Iver because the shliach doesn't know anything. But I think we're getting a little far afield from the actual shot here, where shlichus yad is what we're talking about, and this eved, the eved is doing something that's improper, but without knowledge, he can't be chayiv because the Torah says, "I'll call Dvar Pesha." So that's Beis Hillel's position, that I will be more machmir against the shomer, because the shaliach has no way of connecting the dots. Okay, so that's a logical interpretation. What happens in your case, that's another zach. I mean, we can talk about that in a different context, but there's no shlichus yad, and this whole focus is on shlichus yad. taking a pot and making chalayim is not shlichus yad. So we can't really make the parallel. It's a good question, but it has nothing to do really with our case. Okay,
Rabbi,
now that's the machlekes Beis Shammai Hillel. Yeah, David.
okay, I'm a little confused. If you have a shomer, what qualifications, first of all, does a shomer have to have in order to be a shomer? Is he a student? Has he
All
learned?
he has to do is have a requirement to hold on to something. I tell you, do me a favor, I'm going out of town, hold this object for me. That's it, made a shomer chinam. Do me a favor, just put it away, don't do anything with it. When I come back in a week, I'll take it back. So he's
Okay, now the
able-
Yeah, okay. Now the shomer has somebody a helper who helps him out.
right, exactly.
Okay. He too has no experience or whatever. He's just working for somebody. I can't lift something.
Right.
He schleps it for me.
Got it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
Now you're having a question. Who's responsible for something?
Well, the shomer all
You're
of a
going
sudden
into-
said- No, but you have to understand that the circumstances with the shomer gets it to his mind that he wants this object. He wants to use this object. He's not content to just let it sit on a shelf until it's back. He wants to do something with it. Otherwise, I mean, that's the catalyst. Is
Yeah,
that
but it's his intention to
intention. Right, yes.
reimburse it or just to use it and just be deceitful to the person and just say, hey, he's gonna steal it.
Who will be the worse off if I just use it? Yeah, exactly. I mean, the shomer is saying, who will be the worse off? I'm going to take it and do something with it, and fine. When the owner comes back, I'll give it back to him.
Well,
So
if that's the case, why would you, we're going, here you got that we're saying this man is already a thief because he's got the intention before he gets it, and that's why he's doing it. Well, isn't there a burden of responsibility on the person that's given it to somebody to watch? I'm not going to just pick somebody off the street and say, listen, I got to run out of town today. I need you to watch my gold watch or my jewelry or whatever it is.
right.
I mean, You're
But
supposed
he-
to know who this person is.
Yeah, no. It's a friend of his. No. He's telling someone that he knows. Take this chayfetz and hold it for me, and you be my shomer. You have nothing to do. I'm not paying you, but you have nothing to do. And other than carelessness, you're not chayav for anything. You're not chayav for anything. Says so. So now he gets it into his head that, you know what, I do want to use this chayfetz. So according to Beis Shammai, if he just utters in front of witnesses, I am taking this chayfetz and using it, enough to make him chayiv if something happens to the chayfetz, because then his status changes from a shomer chinam to a shoel, because okay, we're gonna say he borrowed it, quote unquote borrowed it, and a shoel is chayiv for ones. So if something happens inadvertently to the chayfetz, it's an ones, but he's a shoel. He's no longer a shomer. Shomer chinam is potter from ones. A shoel is chayiv from ones. He became from a shomer chinam to a shoel, and he's chayiv. Says Beis Hillel, no, you can't be chayiv because your status changed because you just said something. You have to do. Okay, fine, but he does. He takes it from its perch on the shelf, and he actually uses it. Beis Hillel says, you're right. He's now become a shoel, and therefore, if something happens, I'm chayiv. Now, next question: what happens if not only does he doesn't do anything with it? He says to his eved, to his assistant, do me a favor, take this and move it over there. Take this and move it over there. Okay, fine. So by moving it over there, he's now changing its status from a shomer chinam to a shoel. Okay, an accident happens, and shoel is chayiv ba'ones. Logically, you would say, and shliach l'dvar avera, since he did something inappropriate, shlichus yad is inappropriate, and therefore the eved should be chayiv because he was the one who moved it from point A to point B, so he absolved the owner, the shomer. Says Beis Hillel, oh no, this is not like every other case where ein shliach l'dvar avera. Because in this particular case, there is a specific pasuk which makes the shomer chayiv. Without that pasuk, I would agree with you 100%. It's a classic case of en shlichus l'dvar avera, and the shaliach should be chayiv. But I have a pasuk that doesn't allow that to happen, and it's the shomer, the guy who says it, who is the one who's responsible. And again, if you're looking for a svara, what Menashe said makes sense, is because in a case of shlichus, now we're saying, okay, he didn't know, but let's take it to another degree. Let's say the assistant did know. He did know that what he was doing was inappropriate, that he was taking the other guy's object, because he saw the whole thing unfold. He saw Shimon come to his boss, let's say Ruvain, and say, "Do me a favor, just hold on to this." So he knows that. He knows that Reuven's not supposed to touch it, but Reuven tells Shimon, "Do me a favor, touch it and move it." So now we have a case where the Eved actually knows that Reuven is doing something inappropriate, right? Not just accidentally, but there is no transference in this particular case of Shliach L'Dvar Avera, because Reuven has a posuk that he has to adhere to, which doesn't apply to Shabbos and to all the other Averas, Chometz on Pesach, whatever. It has nothing to do with it. Shlichus, converting an item, puts another burden on you, the shomer, that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to tell someone else, "Do this for me." And in the back of his mind, he says, "You know what? If anybody's going to get the sin here, it's the shliach, not me." Says Beis Hillel, "No way. I'm going to make you chayiv, even though you, under normal circumstance, you would not be chayiv. The shliach would be chayiv. I'm going to make you chayiv because of the extra words in the Torah, al kol dvar pesha." So now we have the whole picture in front of us that this is an anomaly to the whole inyan of shliach l'dvar avera, because normally shliach l'dvar avera absolves you and makes the shliach chayiv. But when there is a specific pasuk, and I'm saying in this case, not only when he is ignorant of what's going on, but the shliach is totally knowledgeable, and he knows that what he's doing is inappropriate because the owner of the chaypitz did not want this to be converted. But nevertheless, he listens to his boss, who tells him, "Move it over there." And you would think, wait a minute, now he's totally doing something inappropriate. He should know better. This is the exception to the rule that en shlichus l'dvar avera, that you can't shift the burden of avera to the shaliach because of a pasuk. So that's really the chiddush, is that the pasuk has enough strength to it to overturn what is the normal svara of ein shliach l'dvar avera, right? That's what we're saying. That ein shliach l'dvar avera will not apply here because of a pasuk. Okay, so I hope that clears it up a little bit. Is because we all have these feelings of, well, he's not doing the right thing, and right, of course he's not doing the right thing, but the Torah says in this particular case, you can't do the transference of avera to the shaliach because of a pasuk. Under normal circumstances, of course he'd be chayiv. You know, you can't take instruction from your boss, and your Eved is a Jewish slave. He's not a goy. So a Jewish slave, we're saying he has to know better, and that's why ein shlichus l'dvar avera. Except where there's a pasuk that overrides the svara of ein shlichus l'dvar avera.
How does that work with an Eved Kanani who also has obligation not to?
Yeah,
Well,
Signa,
well,
yeah,
both
okay,
sides,
but not as much machma by an Eved Kanani, because under this circumstance, he's just I mean, again, he's not chayiv.
The Losas,
Say an Eved Kanani shlich l'dvar avera, he's over Shabbos. I mean, he doesn't have to hold Shabbos. He doesn't have to, even though he has to hold Lo Signov, right? He has to hold Lo Signov. But now this
Well, that was actually about the Shabbos issue, an interesting one. On the one hand, you've got a newly purchased Evet Kanani. What do they know from Shabbos? So you tell them, you buy them on a Friday afternoon, and then the next thing you know, Friday night, you're telling them light the candles and do this and do that. The Evet Kanani, well, not only is our obligation, wouldn't even know, but the Baal is still responsible because, in that case, because it says, Vavdo, Vamaso, Hamaro, and so on.
Yeah. Now look, I mean, that would be a different story entirely. I think that wouldn't apply here. But anyway, so this is an interesting machlokes and an interesting thought process because it goes against the grain to everything that we've been taught about shlichus l'dvar avera, and because we have a pasuk, the pasuk mitigates that and doesn't allow shlichus l'dvar avera to be the controlling issue because of the pasuk. Without a pasuk, no question, we would say a shlichus l'dvar avera, and the shliach should be chayav, like in every other case, no question. Okay, so let's just go a little bit weiter. So that's the original machlokes of the first part of the Mishnah. Now, we're by the two dots. Hita esachavius. The next subject, the second subject of the Mishnah, we could take a look, is if he just tilted the chavius and he drank the revius. So what did he do? He really did misappropriate because he drank the revius, but he didn't make a kinyan. So how does that play out? What does that mean? So now, Omar Rava, Omar Rabba. Okay, this is Rabba here, not Rabba. Omar Rabba, Lo Shani Ela Nishbra. The only time he is not chayiv is if it breaks, right? If it actually breaks after he tilts it. Says Rashi, the onesu v'hari lo kana, she's chayiv ba'onsu. Now listen to this. He's a shomer chinam, right? All of a sudden, by taking it, we would say that he now has a different shlichus, a different category, and he becomes an onus. Hold on a second. And he's now a shoel, and he's chayiv in onus. He's chayiv for ones as a shoel. Says the Gemara, only if it breaks is he not chayiv. If it becomes sour, in other words, it turns into vinegar, mishalam es kula. He has to pay the whole value of the barrel, even though he just drank a revius. My tama, yiri didei hu dahanale. So it's an interesting expression. His arrows, and we'll see what Rashi says. His arrows cause damage. Let's take a look. Ela nishbra the onesu v'hari lo kana she's chayv be'onsen. Since he just tilted it and didn't do a kinyan, he is not a shoel. He didn't become a new entity from a shomer to a shoel. Chmitza pshia, but chmitza, vinegar turning into sour is pshia. That's carelessness. Umazik biyodayin. The b'shvil sheyachsra hechmitza shekein derech yain lahachmitz bekli chaser. So I learned something interesting. I'm not a wine connoisseur, but I learned from this Rashi that if you have a barrel full of wine and you take some of the wine out and you leave the rest of the wine in the barrel and it's not full to the top, there's a far greater likelihood that the whole wine will become vinegar than if it's a full barrel. In other words, a full barrel to the very top, according to this, won't become vinegar.
But I've heard of such things, not in terms of turning vinegar, though it does make sense. There are gadgets. I don't bother. Okay, my wine comes with a screw top and it's extra sweet. But that if you have real good wine, they have things where gadgets that you can put in place instead of just putting a cork back in the bottle, that you can actually put something in it, and it's basically to take the air out of the top of it, because it's the oxygen in the air that ends up causing the wine to go bad fast.
To go bad. Yeah. So this is the pshat. In other words, generally speaking, wine in a full barrel is okay. Once you remove part of the wine and leave everything in the barrel, you don't start bottling it or whatever, then far greater likelihood that it will turn sour. So in this particular case, the fact that he tilted the barrel to drink the wine and didn't make a kinyan, meaning he didn't take it over, does not absolve him from pshia, because he's a shomer, right? A shomer is chayiv pshia, shomer chinam. A shoyel is chayiv einis. Once you take it, it becomes yours, meaning your rishus, because you made a kinyan, then it's yours. But if you didn't make a kinyan, it's not yours. So you're still only chayiv pshia. But if it comes vinegar, you are chayiv because you were posheya. You were careless. You allowed the rest of the wine with, like you say, with air in it, that it did not, that it wasn't protected. So that's shot in the Mishnah, that Rabbah tells us that if it breaks and you're not chayiv for breakage for oines because you're still a shomer chinam, you're okay. But if you do something that allows it to become sour, then you're chayiv because you're no longer just careless. What you did is you actually caused, and Rashi says, look at the words Rashi, Gidi didei ahanale chetzim shelo, arrows, he uses the word arrows, gormalo lahachlet. Your arrows, what you did, caused it to become sour. Yeah. So therefore, you're chayiv. So that's an interesting interpretation that Rabbah just wants us to understand why, if you just tilt the chavius, then and it breaks, ain't a mishalem. But if it doesn't break and becomes vinegar, you are chayiv because that's pshia, and you are chayiv pshia. You're still a shomer chinam. Nothing changed, but you're chayiv for pshia, and you were careless by allowing it to become sour. Okay, that's an interesting interpretation. Now the last part of the Mishnah tells us specifically, he made a kinyan hagbah. No question that he became the owner, because once you do hagbah, it's yours. But natal haimenu, and he takes from it. So what does the Mishnah say? He just brings a revius, v'nishbra, mishalem demei kula. Then he has to pay the whole thing. So what does the Gemara say? Omar Shmuel. So Shmuel gives us the following interpretation. Loy natal mamish. Al-kivin sheik be a little afapishlo natal. So here we're going to go back to the machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Think about it for a minute. Shmuel says you don't actually have to have taken it. What does he mean, lo natal? He says, given that he doesn't have to actually have drunk the revius, is what Shmuel is saying. Given the natal, since he picked it up, so given shehegbiya, even though he didn't drink the revius, he's chayiv, right? That's Shmuel's interpretation. So now the Gemara is going to ask a very important question. If that's the case, then Shmuel holds shlichus yad ein tzricha chasaron, because you just lifting it without drinking it is enough. What's the problem with that? That's Beis Shammai's theory. Now we're going to get back to the question that we had last week. Is it possible that Shmuel holds like Shammai? Of course not. So how do you understand this Gemara? If he's saying that shlichus yad ein tzricha chasaron like Beis Shammai, because he just lifted it without actually drinking it, and you're telling me he's chayiv, how can he be chayiv? He didn't do anything. So you have to have a chisaron, you have to have a deficit, you have to have something that transpired here that shows that he misappropriated. And again, so now we're back to the machshava kamaisa question. Just machshava alone? No, we don't hold like Beis Shammai that machshava kamaisa. We hold like Beis Hillel. You have to have an act. So how can Shmuel say? Lo natal mamish? He doesn't actually have to have drunk the wine. Just lifting it makes it guilty. How can he be guilty? You have to have a chesaron. Nothing happened. That's the question. So Shmuel can say that, but that means he holds like Beis Shammai, and we know that he can't hold like Beis Shammai because Allah is not like Beis Shammai, and Shmuel is an Amora. So we're going to say that an Amora who we paskin like is going to paskin like Beis Shammai. It can't happen. That doesn't happen. So we have a question here. What is pshat in these words of the Gemara? Right? So the Gemara says, Omale Shani Hacha. No, our case is different than every other case. Why is it different? Because the Shani Hacha, the Nichale the Tia, because so this is an interesting point. The Shomer knows what we know. That if he takes wine out, the rest of it could become vinegar. He knows that. So what's he doing? He's really misappropriating and he's doing shlichus yad. But what's happening here is he does the shlichus yad and he doesn't take the wine because he wants the wine to be protected by the rest of the wine that he's not going to use. So think about this for a minute. If he takes the wine out, he's chayiv. We're saying that if he doesn't take the wine out, he's also chayiv because he did misappropriate, except that he left it in the wine casket. Why? Because he knew if he took it until he is ready to remove all the wine, if he takes part of the wine, it's going to become vinegar. So this guy says, you know what? I'm really going to steal or misappropriate, but I'm not going to take it out. Because if I take it out, I'll spoil the rest of it. Says the Gemara, then you're chayiv for everything. Because now you're no longer a shomer, you are a shoyel. You're borrowing the wine and you're not actually drinking it, but allowing it to stay in the barrel to be protected by the rest of the wine. You're responsible for all the wine. Now what happens? Later we say nishbara, the barrel was pushed by somebody or accidentally fell. You know what? You're chayiv for everything because you are now a shoel. Why am I a shoel? I didn't take it. I didn't misappropriate. Yes, you did because you took the wine and you allowed it to sit in the barrel and be protected by the rest of the wine. Isn't that an interesting theory?
But there's
He
no,
didn't actually take the wine. Go ahead, Jay.
there's no Misa here. Why do we?
No. We're saying there is a Misa because the Misa is that
You didn't take the wine out, you said.
yeah, but the Misa is that he now wanted that wine. It's his. He took it, but he instead of taking it and actually drinking it, he left it to protect the rest of the wine because he wanted everything. And when he's ready, he would pour everything out into bottles, and therefore nothing would become vinegar.
But
So
that
we're
would be
imputing.
later. That
No,
would be later.
we're imputing that he already converted it. That is the Misa, except that he left it in the barrel in order for the whole thing not to become chometz.
But if you look at the barrel, you don't see any difference.
That's true. You don't see. You're 100% right. You don't see, but according to Shmuel, Shana Hocha, our case is different than every other case. The nichelated to have a chavis kula bosses lahai revered. There's something in the Torah that tells us a bosses l'davar ha'asr. What is bosses? It's like an assistant. A bosses means that it is a support. That's what bosses means. It's kind of like it's a vague term.
A base.
But it's a carrier, if you will, a carrier. So what he's done here is he has actually become chaya for the whole thing because by taking it, not just saying it, but by taking it. So the problem that we have to get over in our mind is he took it, but he didn't take it, right? He took it, but he didn't take it out. So if he took it out, we would all say, oh, 100% he did shlichus yad.
Took it out and then he puts it back.
And, or he puts it, right, or he puts it back, better yet, right? So not taking it out, but wanting it is like taking it out and putting it back. Good point. That's a good way of looking at it. So by putting it back, he's showing his intent to take it. So he's over in Shlichus Yad. But he left it in the barrel. Says the Gemara, he is a shoel because he wants to take the whole thing, and therefore he's chayiv in onsen. But it's a little bit of a chap because if he took it outright, of course he stole it. Of course he did shlichus yad. But if he didn't take it outright, you might say, but he didn't do anything. But he did. Well, your point is good, Jay. So if you want to think about it, he took it out and put it back in. Now, so he did a kinyan. No question he did a kinyan because he lifted the whole barrel and he took it out. So you're going to say, oh, but he put it back in, so he really did tshuva. No. He took it out. He's chayiv. The fact that he put it back in was for his own benefit because he didn't want the whole thing to become vinegar.
For another reason, he put it back in.
For another reason, exactly right. So for the other reason, he's not absolved.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting chap here. And to understand, so according to Shmuel, he's not holding like Beis Shammai. He's not saying that shlichus had and it's chesaron. Of course, it needs a chesaron like Beis Hillel. What's the chesaron? The chesaron is that he took the wine, right? He actually took the wine, but he said, "I'm going to be smart and leave it in the barrel so it shouldn't spoil the whole barrel." But he actually took it. So that's an interesting shot, and that's why Shmuel says he's chayiv, and he doesn't hold like Beis Shammai. He holds like Beis Hillel that shlichus yad tzricha chesaron, but we have a chesaron.
Rabbi, can I clarify something?
Yes,
It means so Beis Shammai was purely intent. So if his intent was to take it, but he didn't do anything to touch it or alter it, but just had intent, the halacha is not like Beis Shammai.
Correct.
But by virtue of declaring or taking possession or removing it and putting it back in,
Right.
that's an acknowledgement. It's an act of taking ownership. That's when the transfer occurs.
Correct.
But if it was only, I took it in my mind and I didn't do anything to it, it's pure intent and it's not, he's not violating anything because it's just machshava.
Because he just spoke it out and didn't do anything. Right. In this particular case, we're saying that what appears to be nothing but machshava is a maisa because, as Jay pointed out, consider it as if he took it out. He took the wine and then put it back in. Why? Because he wanted to protect the barrel, but he actually already converted. He didn't drink the wine, he just took the wine, and he made hagbah, right? So he made a kinyan, but a kinyan itself, so what did he do? He made a kinyan, took the wine, put it back in, protected the whole barrel, and says Shmuel, that's the shani hacha. That's what Shmuel's saying. Our case is different because it was a basis, it was in a holder, it was a holder for a dvar avera, the barrel, yeah.
So the kinyan makes the transfer.
Correct.
If he had not done the transfer, but he had just said it to himself or thought about it,
would
there
not
would
have
be-
met exactly. So that's how the
How much
Gemara.
time has to be, how much time can take place from when he theoretically puts it back in? This has to be like almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
yeah.
he's taking it out and
No, we're imputing that he took it out. Even
Right.
if he never took it out, but we're imputing that he took it out but put it back in order to protect the wine. So the fact that he never took it out is irrelevant.
But-
You make a good point. by saying it's
theoretically,
as
he
if
took it out. He took it out and no time elapsed. He put it back in.
Right.
Theoretically.
Oh, look, maybe it was a half hour. I mean, I don't think the time factor, it's in one period of time. It doesn't have to be the same instant he poured it out, poured it back. It could have been he left it out a little bit. It doesn't become chometz. It doesn't become vinegar in an instant. It
Right.
makes it a day, a two, a week. I don't know how long it takes, whatever it takes. But you're pointing out very interestingly that he took it out and put it back. That's the Maisa. even if he didn't do it, but that's what his intent is. So if his intent is, and he made Hagbah, you're chayiv. That's the point, that the Hagbah makes you chayiv as if you took it out, even if you didn't. Okay, so now we understand this Gemara. Again, that Hagbah, he has to pay the whole thing because he's become a shoel, and a shoel is chayiv in onsen. So if someone pushes it or the barrel tilts or whatever happens and breaks, he is chayiv. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now, the final piece of the Gemara, Hoy Ravashi. So Ravashi asks a kasha, and this is going to be an interesting sort of footnote to the rest of the Gemara. Hoy Ravashi, Higbia Arnike. Okay, I give you my wallet. Arnike is actually, let's do the Rashi first, because let's finish that first thing. The nichale to have a kula chavis bosses lahai revius. This is what we're saying. We wanted to be a bosses and an assistant or a holder for the revius. Why? Shetishma osa revius, that this revius will guard the barrel. Velo tachmin, will olam shlichas yad bedavar achet tzricha chasaron. You need shlichas yad to have a chasaron. V'hanotl pikad l'magbia al manas l'shloch bo yad. Kol zman shelo masru eine mechayiv v'hagvoso. Hol v'lo notlu al manas ligza el l'shloch bo yad. The shlichas yad b'lo chasaron lessa. That's what we've been saying. Aval yayin, wine, she'ena mishtamer el b'kli. You can only sort of guard it in the kli itself, b'kli male in a full barrel. Like you said, Jay, it's as if he took it and put it back. He took it out, poured it back in order to guard the rest of the barrel and not let it become vinegar. The Nasa Shoel, that makes him a Shoel. I'll call Shar HaChavias. He's now a Shoel for the whole Chavias, and therefore when the Chavias breaks, it's an ones, and a shoel is chayiv and ones. So he transfers from a shomer chinam to a shoel, and because of what he did, or didn't do in this case, but he becomes chayiv. Okay, now we'll get to the sugya. Bar Ravashi, be a arnike little dinner below notal, and he didn't take it. Okay, so this is going to be on Shmuel. We just resolved Shmuel, and the Gemara says Ravashi has a kasha. Hegvia arnike little haimenu dinar mahu. If a person makes a kinyan on someone else's wallet, and he has the intent to take a dinar, to take a coin out, right? Rashi below natal, and he didn't take it. L'shmuel mahu. We just got through saying that Shmuel tzricha chesaron, and we said that by yayin there is a chesaron because it's as if he took it out and put it back. What about it's not wine? What about it's a case of a wallet and a coin? Does Shmuel say the same thing? It's as if he took the coin out and put it back. Do we say that? Mar chamer hudlo minta, right? Are we saying that it's because of wine that he doesn't want it to get spoiled that we make this exception?
Exception, yeah.
Right. So because of wine, are we saying that's why Ela Agav Chamra Avulzuza Minter? In other words, are we saying it's because of wine that we make the exception, but we don't make the exception by coin? Or Dilma Shana Niterusa de Arnike Niterusa de dinner? Or are we saying that it's different? In other words, is Shmuel saying that the case of the wine applies to something that doesn't have the same kind of circumstance of bosses? Wine has bosses. Dinner doesn't have bosses. Because what? The rest of the coins are going to get rusty. They're going to get, what's going to happen to the coins, right? And so you can't make that leap and say that just because he took out a coin or didn't take out the coin but had intention, that Shmuel's theory applies here too. So that's the kasha. And the Gemara says teku. that's very interesting. We can't conclude it, and it's going to be something we have to wait till El Yonovi. But you think about it for a minute, it really does weigh strongly on the side of saying that there is a distinction between the two. In other words, he's asking this kasha whether money is like wine, right? But why should it be? I can tell you why it shouldn't be, but why should it be? Right?
So Rabbi, it's perishable, and since the coin is theoretically permanent, there's that distinction. It's only in the instance where something is subject to spoilage that applies, and otherwise it doesn't. Is that what the distinction is?
But you could argue with the coin because the total wallet is worth less money. Something has changed, even though it's not a spoilage due to vinegar. But if the wallet gets stolen, it doesn't have the full value of what it had earlier.
Okay, so
Ganef then gets involved.
right. So let's take a look at Rashi. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Aval Zuza Minter Levado Lo Nichale de Lahave Inach Bosses Lahai Velo Have Kanot Lamaniach. So Rashi is saying one view is that no, he doesn't want the rest of the coins to be a bosses for this coin. So it's not like, Jay, your example of notel maniach by the wine. It's as if he took it out and put it back, because you can't say that by a coin that the purse should be a bosses. Or last Rashi, Shanani Tirusa de Arnike, a wallet with a coin, Kis mole niro mishtama ve'enoach lios neva kedina yechidi. You know why it's like wine? Because a coin in a wallet is safer than a coin in your pocket, where it can fall out, right? If it's in a wallet, it's the wallet is the security. The wallet is the protection, like a barrel. So the argument is that the coin is safer in the wallet than it would be yechidi by itself, and therefore it should be like the barrel of wine, where the wine is safer being in the barrel than taking it out, because if you take it out, you'll make it chometz. So that's the nub of the issue. That's really the machlokes that Rav Ashi is asking. When you have a purse that if you take the coin out, it's like the wine that you take out. It can create a problem, because you can lose the coin, just like you can damage the rest of the barrel and make it vinegar. So therefore, there's a theory to say, a havamina really, that the coin is like the wine.
Yeah.
That's why he says teku, because otherwise, come on, a wine is wine, a coin is a coin. It's not the same, but it's the same because of the question of bosses, is that a holder, that's with the whole issue. He's making the bosses. So in the barrel, he's making the bosses for the wine. In the case of the wallet, he's making the wallet a bosses for the coin. So therefore, yeah, go ahead.
You have to switch to safety becomes the issue
Right.
here. That's
Exactly.
what he thinks
But
about.
Rabbi, what troubles me is in the case of wine, he doesn't have to do anything to the barrel except affect the kinyan. He could leave it in the barrel just as it was. Nothing could change it. It's safe as it was. And because he did a kinyan or a declaration publicly, then it could spoil by itself, even in the barrel, and he would be
Tired because he's a shoel.
Right.
Because he became a shoel.
Right. And so why isn't the same thing true in the case of
No, that's the argument. The argument is it should be the same in the case of the wallet, but the counter argument is that wine is unique because of the spoilage factor. So the machlokes is spoilage different? You're not going to spoil the coin. Okay, you may lose it, but losing is not the same as spoiling. When Shmuel made this exception, did he make it only for yayin, because yayin has the quality of spoilage, but a coin you can't spoil. So can we draw that parallel? And that's the teku. We're not sure if we can draw that parallel, so we can't say definitively yes or no. So the Gemara says teku. But you're right. The argument for or against would be that a coin it can't spoil. And if the whole point of wine is spoilage, the coin can't. We're gonna create a new theory that it's safer in the wallet. Okay, but safer in the wallet isn't the same as spoilage in the barrel. It really isn't the same. But there's a havamina that you can compare them. So that's why he says teku is because I don't. He says Rav Ashi says I don't know what would Shmuel hold in this particular case. Did he make the exception of shlichus yad only because it's yayin, or is the theory the same and therefore the coin is safer in the wallet, and therefore it's as if he took the whole wallet, and if the wallet gets stolen or something happens, you're chayiv.
So
That's
since
really the whole like it.
since the Gemara couldn't resolve it, I give up also.
Right. We're seeing that the Gemara, he's having a trouble with it. Otherwise, you might say very quickly, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's exactly like yayin. You know, it's a parallel. I mean, you could argue that. So the Gemara says, you know what? Not so fast. I'm not so sure it's like yayin. So therefore, we have to be a little bit more circumspect. So hadnullah perek hamafkid hadullah. I mean, normally you don't make a siyum, but we say hadullah. Baruch Hashem, we came to the point where we finished hamafkid, and Mitzvah Hashem next week we'll start a whole new perek hazov. And very interesting, different, a little different, but Mitzvah Hashem will go. So.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
just as a historical note, when Rabbi Hyatt taught us Bava Metzia many years ago.
Yeah.
And Jay and I may be the only ones left over from then. He did not teach us Hazohav because he said it required a little bit more continuity than once a week learning.
Yeah, right.
So,
Okay.
so if you have any compunctions
No,
about
but I want to really laud all of us, because look at this. I mean, we've been now doing Bava Metzia for quite some time, and Baruch Hashem, we finished 3 prakim. I mean, it's no small matter to go through Shnayim Ochsim, Ela Metzias, Mafkid. This is the bread and butter of Bava Metzia. In most yeshivas, when they're actually learning the blot, the daf, and going through it, not daf yomi, but the daf, meaning that you're learning the sugya, it's the first 3 prakim that everybody really focuses on. Bava Metzia is quite more than the first 3 prakim, but Hazov, that you do on your own already. That you do, in second Seder. You don't do it in first Seder. At least in our experience, that's because to do 40 blots in a Zman, usually in yeshiva, you learn Masechta over like a winter Zman. So that would be 5-6 months, and we wouldn't get as far as Mendalit, of course. And then the next Zman, you're moving to something else. In yeshiva, you don't learn this for 2 years like we do. You go now they learn Nedarim, or they learn Baba Basra, or they learn something else. The yeshiva Mesechtas, there's about 7 or 8 yeshiva Mesechtas they have to rotate. They rotate them every 6 months, not every 2 years. So the fact that we are diligent and pressing forward, daf by daf, that says something for our diligence, for our smarta, that we put our mind to it, and we want to finish the whole Masechta. So we're going daf by daf. So notwithstanding, and I understand Rabbi Hyatt's points, but the fact of the matter is that it's no small achievement. And Hadullah Hamafkid, that we finally concluded Masechet Perek Hamafkid, and Mitzvah Hashem next week we'll pick up with Hazov.
So I think Art Scroll prints it in another volume on Bava Metzia.
So they keep these 3 in one volume. Yeah, but Bava Metzia is very long, so you can't make it in one.
Because the Mishnah, this is the last page in my Art Scroll.
So you have to go to the next book.
Volume 2. I have to go by the
Volume 2. Okay, right. In the regular Gemara, we just move on, but right, we'll go to volume 2, and Mitzvah Hashem, we'll pick it up next week.
Good.
Yashikah.